Juvenile justice in Jacksonville. Just ahead, why a new investigative series is raising concerns. Good morning and live from Studio 5. This is First Coast Connect on 89.9. Hope you're staying warm out there. Thanks for tuning in this chilly Thursday morning. I'm Melissa Ross, and just ahead, we've got a closer look at some eye-opening new statistics about North Florida's criminal justice system, in particular, the way it handles juvenile offenders. That's this Sunday, the Florida Times-Union will publish the first in an ongoing series about juvenile justice issues in our area. It's an enlightening look at how juvenile offenders in North Florida's Fourth Circuit are treated compared to other jurisdictions around the state. Times-Union reporter Topher Sanders has been working on this story, and he joins us now in studio with a preview. Topher, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, thanks. And here's our question to callers. When it comes to juvenile justice in Jacksonville, how minors are treated in the system, the rates of incarceration, and more, we want your questions and comments. Give us a call. 549-2937. That's 549-2937. Send your emails to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. Tweets to @MelissaInJax, and we can also get your comments on the air on our Facebook page. So Topher, this is the first in an occasional series. What prompted the TU's attention to this matter?
Well, the juvenile justice system has been something that I've been interested in since I've been at the Times-Union, and now that I'm on the investigative team, it was something that I wanted to dedicate a little time in looking into, and not soon after I started making the rounds and asking some questions, we learned about this issue of direct commitments and how we differ from the rest of the state related to this thing called direct commitments.
And let's explain, what is that? What is direct commitments?
Yes, a direct commitment is when there are usually plea deals that juveniles will reach with the state on anything that they're accused on. They're usually, direct commitments usually, well, they always do not involve DJJ.
The Department of Juvenile Justice.
The Department of Juvenile Justice conducts these very detailed evaluations of young people, their treatment needs, what's causing them to act out criminally, and when you have a direct commitment, DJJ does not do that, and they're not permitted or not given the opportunity to make a recommendation to the court as to what should happen to the young person.
So what are the so in effect, in essence, what is this series finding? What is the major finding?
Well, that when it comes to direct commitments, we dramatically lead the state in this number of direct commitments. And when you talk to the public defender's office and some private attorneys in the community, also at play with direct commitments is that they'll say a significant number of those young people are given the choice between either accepting a commitment to a facility for a period of months or years, or being charged as an adult, and they describe it as a threat, that they're being threatened with adult charges, while also being said, well, if you take a deal to be committed, then we won't charge you.
How many juveniles have had this experience, and are these nonviolent offenses or violent ones?
The charges are some of the charges are violent charges. So let's be clear about that. There'll be one young lady that's featured in the story on Sunday who was charged with armed robbery. So there are violent charges among these young people, and in numbers we're talking, when we say direct commitments, we're thinking about 1,500 young people. That's what the data from the Department of Juvenile Justice says. 1,500 young people in the last 5 years, and of those, about 800 of them is what the PD will estimate face a threat of adult charges before accepting the plea deal.
And if you're just joining the program, we're speaking right now with Times-Union investigative reporter Topher Sanders about Sunday's series in the Florida Times-Union looking at the state of juvenile justice in Jacksonville. We'll go to your calls in just a moment at 549-2937. So what is the response, Topher, out of the state attorney's office? State Attorney Angela Corey ran on a platform of reducing crime in Jacksonville, making the streets safer. It is politically popular with much of the public. What is the response from her office to your report?
Well, we're still working with State Attorney's Office to see if we can sit down and discuss the issue with her. But in general, having listened to Ms. Corey in public, She describes what she prioritizes when she looks at these criminal matters. She prioritizes victims' rights and community safety. And we haven't had a detailed conversation with her, but just listening to her in the public, I would imagine that those priorities, victim rights and safety in the community, often would play a role in this. Now, the Miss Corey's office, we haven't spoken to them, but I imagine she probably will not agree with what the public defender's office and some of the private attorneys are saying. She probably will not agree.
And what's the essence of their concern?
That the office is threatening young people with adult charges to compel them into taking these commitment deals. I don't know that the state attorney's office is going to agree with that premise.
Is that something that occurs in other jurisdictions?
It does not appear to occur throughout the state in the way it occurs here.
What's the difference what's the disparity between the Fourth Circuit and other circuits?
In Miami-Dade, in the last 5 years, there were 34 direct commitments. In the last 5 years in Jacksonville area, there have been 1,500.
Quite a difference. And would Miami, and is the level of juvenile crime in Miami-Dade comparable to Duval?
Juvenile crime, I don't know. I know that they send less young people to incarceration than we do. Significantly less in the last 5 years, half as many.
When it comes to early intervention for juveniles in Duval County, TOFR, let's discuss what does exist.
Well, there are a lot of diversion programs. Ms. Corey has a diversion program as well. We'll be looking and asking questions about the program and trying to learn as much as we can about the diversion program there. And that Mr. Schwartzstein has a diversion program that he was very proud of.
The former state attorney.
Yes, ma'am. And so, one thing I want to make clear in this is that trend lines on criminal crime with young people is all going down. And that's in line with all crime statistics across the country. It's all trending down. Arrests are down. The number of young people actually charged as adults is down, statewide and in our own community. But what is up are these direct commitments, these deals being reached where DJJ is not involved and doesn't evaluate the child and make a recommendation to the court. Those are up.
And let's explain what happens over the long term when a juvenile is committed in this way. What's the timeline?
Well, they end up spending months, years in a committed facility, and what critics will say is if through this process of reaching deals where they're faced with the option of adult charges or the deal, you may send some young people to these committed facilities who don't need to be there. The young people who otherwise would benefit more from in-community services. You take those young people and put them in communities, and these commitment communities with other young people who have real intensive struggles. Then you have a person spending a year with that community, and then they come back to your community, and whatever things that rubbed off on them, bad habits, they bring that back to your community when they come back.
You haven't received a response yet from the state attorney's office. Recently, the state attorney made some remarks to the local Tiger Bay Club, very critical of the Florida Times-Union, saying that she believes that the newspaper of record in this community has an agenda to go after her, in lieu of other words. What's your response to the hostility and that it is not a good relationship?
I think it's unfortunate, and I'll say to you just my own personal experience. Ms. Corey has been nothing but respectful and courteous when I've interacted with her. She's never given me any kind of hostile energy. I will say that for whatever reason, the relationship between her office and the newspaper is not the same relationship we have with other agencies. And I think the community is benefited when the state attorney and the newspaper of record do have a line of communication and can communicate openly. I think the community benefits. So that's what I feel about.
Calling in, tweets coming in. It's time for restorative justice in our schools and our courts, or also known as smart justice. What about that movement, and do you see that coming to this circuit?
Well, there are efforts afoot. I mean, the mayor announced an effort a couple of weeks ago, or a week or so ago, that there's going to be pouring some resources into neighborhood accountability councils and to the teen court. So there are some efforts. There are early intervention programs like you mentioned, like the civil citation program, taking young people who are first-time misdemeanors and giving them alternatives to arrest so that they don't get introduced to the system in that way, but still making them face some consequences. So those things are happening. They're happening to a lesser degree in our community than they are in other places, but they're happening.
And there's pressure on the state attorney's office to increase the number of civil citations by a number of local lawmakers, community activists.
Yes, ma'am.
Where's that conversation?
I think it's still an ongoing conversation. I don't know that they've reached an end point on what's going to happen with that. I think that there are some conversations happening to see if they can increase that, but I don't know if they got a resolution yet.
And if you're just joining us, what are your questions and comments as we preview the Times Union's investigative series debuting this Sunday, looking at issues related to juvenile justice in Jacksonville?
And then on the subject of money, I will say that, it's when they look at the continuum of things they can do to a young person who is accused of a crime, it's 12 times more expensive to put a young person in one of these facilities than it is to put them on probation. Now, I've heard Ms. Corey speak, and what Ms. Corey will say is you can't end your cost analysis there. There's costs also borne when young people you're giving this leniency to recommit.
If they reoffend.
If they reoffend, there's a cost there. So that's what the state attorney would say to that.
Topher, the New York Times recently spotlighted Jacksonville on this issue. They published a story about a teen in Jacksonville who tried to commit an armed robbery, tried to shoot an adult, didn't injure the man, but was sentenced to 70 years without parole, a 14-year-old boy. And that put the national spotlight on the way this circuit treats juveniles. That case cited by some as an especially dramatic example. Now that's a little separate from your story on direct commitments. That this was a juvenile sentenced as an adult.
That's right. Yeah, no, it's a national conversation that the entire country's having, and just as recently as 2012, you have states like Colorado really evaluating how they want to deal with the prosecutor's power to charge a young person as an adult, and putting some mechanisms, some checks and balances in place there, and it's what critics here in our community say needs to happen in the state of Florida to put some checks and balances, allow judges to maybe review some of these decisions so that that they feel that there's some more equity in the system. There's a lot of study out there, most of it saying that those boot camp in particular type of programs are not effective.
But they've largely been discredited.
Yeah,
right?
They have.
Grace emails us on Facebook, when Angela Corey ran for office, she promised to put more juveniles in jail, and people voted for her. Making the case that a large segment of the electorate in this circuit likes this approach and does not have a problem with it.
That's correct. Yes, ma'am. Miss Corey has a huge block of support, and she was very honest and transparent with the voters with how she was going to run the office, and I think that's definitely what's happening. The first part of my examination of this issue isn't looking into the school system. There may be some good research out there connecting, special education and exceptional education to criminal justice and juvenile justice, and that's probably worth a look. I haven't looked at that.
Jim emails the show, the state attorney did not face the voters in 2012. No candidate ran against her. Her popularity may be overblown at this time. No word that I have heard yet about her next race having an opponent.
Yeah, I have not heard anything about the political landscape related to the state attorney's office.
But meanwhile, your piece runs Sunday, and the first in a series?
Yeah, it's definitely ongoing work. We're going to be looking at this for the next following months, and we're really interested in the subject matter. And it's not just going to be myself. There are a number of reporters who will be working on this issue. And I should also note that the piece runs Sunday. Our news partners, First Coast News, will have an in-depth interview with Monica and her mother, with them describing their experience with direct commitment. Monica Jones is one of the young people that we're talking about. That will be in our story. And then on Tuesday, there will be another story looking at the history of the power to charge a juvenile as an adult.
Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
He's Topher Sanders. Read this piece Sunday in the Florida Times Union. Well.